Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into some fascinating material from Brianna Wiest's book, The Mountain is You, Transforming Self-Sabotage into Self-Mastery.
Yeah, it's a really thought-provoking one.
Definitely. And it's not just about, the usual stuff like procrastination. The core idea here, the book argues, is that the biggest thing holding you back, well, it isn't usually your circumstances.
Right. It suggests the biggest obstacle is actually, well, it's you. Specifically, these patterns of self-sabotage.
Exactly. So our mission today, sticking just to what's in this material, is to unpack what self-sabotage really is from this perspective, figure out where it comes from, maybe how you can spot it.
And crucially, how the book suggests you can move from that towards self-mastery.
Yeah. Let's dive in.
Okay.
So first off, this central idea, the book kind of pushes back against thinking self-sabotage is just like weakness or being masochistic.
Right. It argues it's actually more complex. It's driven by something unexpected. The source highlights that it stems from an unconscious need that the self-sabotaging behavior is, weirdly enough, fulfilling.
An unconscious need. So you're blocking yourself, but because some hidden part of you is getting something out of it.
Pretty much. It's a paradox, isn't it? You're standing in your own way, but maybe to satisfy some deeper, unacknowledged requirement.
So the behavior looks self-destructive on the surface.
But underneath, the book frames it as a kind of maladaptive coping mechanism, a flawed strategy.
Like a shortcut.
Exactly, a shortcut to get something, maybe a feeling of safety, or even just the comfort of familiar discomfort without actually facing the real issue underneath.
Can you give some examples from the book how this hidden need might play out?
Sure. The source mentions a few, like sabotaging relationships. It might look like fear of commitment,
Right.
but the book suggests the hidden need might be a fear of really finding yourself, which can feel super vulnerable when you're truly intimate with someone.
Okay. What else?
Or holding back professionally, not always laziness, right? It could be tied to an old belief, maybe from childhood, that success means people won't like you or you'll lose love, so you stay small to feel safe.
Wow.
Even something like constantly psychoanalyzing your feelings
Okay.
seems productive, but the book suggests it can be a way to avoid the raw discomfort of actually feeling those emotions.
So it sounds like these patterns are often fueled by irrational fears, maybe, or just old, unexamined beliefs we picked up about ourselves or the world.
Precisely, from parents, experiences, peers, whatever. It builds this inner narrative, these unwritten rules about what's safe or possible for you, and then you sabotage yourself to stay within those lines.
And the book also talks about a resistance to the unknown, right? Even if the unknown is better.
Yeah, that's a key point. Positive change can trigger self-sabotage simply because it feels unfamiliar. That unfamiliarity equals discomfort.
It's like hitting an upper limit.
Exactly. Or falling back to your baseline of what feels normal or safe, even if normal isn't actually that great. Your system kind of prefers the devil, at first anyway.
So, okay, if this is happening, how would you know? How can you recognize this pattern in your own life?
Well, the main clue the material points to is that persistent gap, between where you say you want to be and where you actually are.
And feeling like you're the one putting the brakes on.
Yeah, that sense of your own internal resistance being the main obstacle, that consistent disconnect is the big signal.
But it also mentions some more subtle signs, doesn't it? Ways it shows up that aren't maybe obvious self-destruction.
Absolutely. It gets really interesting there.
Like what? What's one surprising sign?
One is denial and justification. Basically, constantly explaining away why you're unhappy or why things aren't working out, making excuses.
Rationalizing everything.
Right. And the source is pretty blunt. Outcomes matter more than intentions. If your excuses are taking the place of actual results, that's a sign you might be in this pattern. It's less about why you didn't and more about the fact that you didn't.
That's a tough one. What else?
Another pattern mentioned is uprooting, always needing a fresh start.
Changing jobs, cities, relationships.
Exactly. But not always because it's genuine growth. Sometimes it's just a way to escape current problems like conflict or stress you don't want to deal with. You keep planting yourself in new soil instead of learning to blossom where you are.
Avoiding the hard work of sticking with something.
Yeah. Then there's downplaying successes.
Making yourself smaller.
Kind of. The book suggests it might be subconscious, trying to seem less threatening so people like you more. Or it could be this weird fear of peaking, like if you succeed too much, there's nowhere else to go.
That fear of success again, it really highlights the twisted logic involved. What else?
Being constantly busy, like wearing busyness as a badge of honor.
But the book sees it differently.
Yeah, it frames it often as just A really effective distraction, running from yourself maybe, or using it as an excuse to duck out of social things or avoid difficult people because you're just so swamped.
Using the schedule as a shield. Got it.
Yes. And another big one, spending time with the wrong people.
How does that fit self-sabotage?
Well, the people you're closest to have a huge impact, right? The book argues that staying connected to people who don't support your growth or who actually reinforce your limitations, that's a form of self-sabotage, even if it feels loyal.
But hang on, if you want supportive people, how is staying with unsupportive ones you're doing? How does the book connect that?
It comes back to that unconscious need idea. If you find yourself consistently drawn to or staying in dynamics that aren't good for you, the book suggests there's likely an unconscious reason. Maybe it fulfills a need for a familiar pattern, even a painful one.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Linking back to those old beliefs or experiences.
Exactly. The idea is people tend to gravitate towards what they unconsciously feel they deserve or what feels familiar, even if consciously they want something else.
That's challenging. Okay, and there was one more. Worrying.
Right. Worrying about irrational fears. Constantly fixating on the least likely worst-case scenarios.
Which feels like you're being prepared, maybe.
You'd think so, but the source argues it's often a deflection. You're projecting deeper, real fears onto something less immediate. You focus all this energy on a low-probability disaster to feel some sense of control.
But the worry itself ends up controlling you.
Precisely. It keeps you mentally stuck, spinning your wheels instead of dealing with what's actually in front of you. The way past that fear, the book says, isn't endless analysis, it's action, building confidence by moving through it.
This all feels really tied to our emotions, doesn't it? How we handle our inner world.
Absolutely. The source links self-sabotage directly to emotional intelligence, or rather, a lack of it contributing to the problem.
How so?
Well, it suggests triggers aren't just random pain points. They're like signals, messengers, pointing to emotions we haven't learned how to process or even recognize. The problem isn't the trigger, it's the lack of skill in handling the response.
So emotions are trying to tell us something, not just hurt us.
Exactly. Guides, not enemies. The source emphasizes that even negative emotions have important messages, like guilt.
Yeah.
It's often less about a specific bad thing you did and more about what you didn't do. Or maybe it's old baggage, like feeling responsible for things that weren't your fault, or just feeling fundamentally flawed somehow.
A deeper sense of deficiency.
Yeah, and regret.
Mhm.
The book frames that not as something to beat yourself up about, but as a super clear signpost for the future.
Oh.
It shows you what you absolutely need to create moving forward. It highlights your real values by showing you what you missed. It becomes a motivator, if you let it.
That's a different way to look at regret. The book also mentioned an emotional backlog.
Yeah, think of it like your email inbox overflowing with unread messages, except it's feelings. Unprocessed emotions just stack up inside, creating this internal noise and disruption.
Until they eventually spill over.
Exactly, often in big outbursts. The point is, emotions are physical experiences. They need to be acknowledged and processed, released somehow. They aren't meant to just sit there festering.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. If you want to overcome this pattern, what's the core lesson the book offers? The most important step?
It's probably the biggest takeaway, and maybe the hardest. It's learning to disconnect action from feeling.
Disconnect action from feeling. What does that actually look like?
It means realizing that what holds you back usually isn't that you can't do something physically. You probably can. It's that you don't feel like doing it.
Ah, the motivation isn't there.
Yeah.
Or it feels uncomfortable.
Right. Our feelings are wired for comfort, familiarity, safety. Anything new, even good new things, can trigger discomfort. And our feelings scream, stop, danger. Feels bad.
Even if logically you know it's the right move.
Exactly. So the crucial shift is understanding you don't wait for the feeling, the motivation, the excitement, the comfort to show up first. You have to act despite the feeling.
You generate the momentum yourself.
Yes. Take the action, then the feeling might follow. You have to inspire yourself, essentially. Just begin. Choose the action, even if it feels weird or hard initially.
That really puts the power back in your hands, doesn't it? Instead of being ruled by whether you feel like it.
Completely. And the book frames this path to self-mastery not as some superhuman feat, but just the natural result of understanding you were the bottleneck and realizing you can actually change that.
But it sounds like it definitely involves getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely. The source is clear. Change is uncomfortable. Our biology likes homeostasis, right? Likes the known. So a key first step, the book suggests, is getting brutally honest. Confronting the problems head
No
on.
more denial.
None. Write it down. What's really wrong? Finances, self-image, anxiety, relationships. Get specific. Put it plainly on paper.
Why is that so important?
Because the material suggests that real change often only kicks in when staying put becomes more uncomfortable than the prospect of changing. That tipping point you mentioned earlier.
When the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of change.
Exactly. And the book talks about harnessing a kind of internal rage, not anger at others, but a fierce refusal to accept your current situation any longer, a commitment to yourself.
But it also warns this path might mean losing things. Comfort, maybe even relationships.
Yes, it acknowledges that. Pushing past your old limits might mean outgrowing your comfort zone, your old routines, maybe even some connections built around the old you. But the perspective offered is powerful.
Which is,
You only lose what was meant for the person you're leaving behind. The people and circumstances aligned with who you're becoming, the book suggests, will meet you there.
that requires a lot of faith in the process.
Yeah.
So how do you actually start making these changes? Is it about waiting for a big breakthrough moment?
Not usually, no. The source really emphasizes the power of microshifts. Tiny, consistent changes.
Not grand gestures.
Right. Think of the penny doubling every day. Small increments, repeated consistently, lead to huge results over time. The advice is, don't wait until you feel like making a massive change. Just make one tiny decision differently today. Build from that.
Just one small thing. Like,
Could be anything. Going for that walk even when you don't feel like it, making that phone call you've been avoiding, setting aside 5 minutes to meditate. Just one small deviation from the old pattern, repeated.
and that builds momentum. What about dealing with the past? Does the book say you just forget it?
Not exactly forget, but release your attachment to it. You can't force yourself to stop thinking about something, but you can actively build a new present and future, step by step.
No.
One technique mentioned is sort of psychologically reframing past events, offering compassion to your younger self who went through it, and crucially, focusing on creating the experiences you wish you'd had now. That's how you loosen the grip of the past. Build the life you need today.
Okay. The book also mentioned adjustment shock. What's that about?
Yeah, this is interesting. It's the idea that even positive change, getting the job, finding the healthy relationship, achieving a goal, can feel really unsettling at first. It can trigger anxiety.
Because it's unfamiliar, even if it's good.
Exactly. It pushes you out of your known territory. It might even bring up old unconscious beliefs. Like if you start making more money, an old belief like rich people are bad might surface and create anxiety or sabotage.
So you have to consciously adjust to the new normal.
Yes. You have to adjust your mindset, maybe learn new skills to handle the new reality, like managing money better or navigating different social dynamics. You have to work to make the new, better reality feel familiar and deserved.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about trauma? How does that fit into self-mastery?
The book emphasizes that trauma isn't just in your head, it's stored in the body. So healing requires more than just talking about it. It needs physical practices, breathing, self-soothing techniques to help your nervous system feel safe again.
And facing things,
Eh.
not avoiding.
Crucially, yes, but safely. If relationships were traumatic, the path involves learning to build healthy relationships now. If money was a source of trauma, it means getting good with finances now. Avoidance just keeps the trauma pattern alive, the book argues. You need corrective experiences.
Confronting it with new tools and in a safe way.
Precisely. The source also suggests a tool like visualizing your highest potential future self.
Tell me about that.
It's a visualization exercise. You imagine the version of you who has overcome these challenges, who is living their potential. You notice their qualities, their habits, how they feel.
And you could interact with this future self.
Yeah, ask for guidance, insight. The key thing the book notes is that this connection should feel calm, affirming, peaceful, not scary. If it feels scary, that's the old fear talking. Your true potential feels like coming home.
That's a beautiful idea. So how does all this translate into day-to-day living? Beyond the big picture.
A huge piece is shifting from chasing feelings like happiness or inspiration to living by principles.
Principles, like values.
Yeah, core values you decide on. The book says principles might seem boring, but they're effective because they guide your behavior consistently, regardless of how you feel moment to moment.
So if you value health, you exercise even if you don't feel like it.
Exactly. If you value connection, you make time for people. If you value financial freedom, you stick to your budget. It's about building your life based on your chosen self-conduct from the inside out, not just reacting to fleeting moods.
That provides stability when emotions are up and down.
For sure. And finally, the material talks about finding your true purpose. Not necessarily one grand calling, but finding that sweet spot where your skills, interests, and what the world needs kind of intersect.
How do you find that?
By asking yourself some tough questions, the book suggests. What would you do if nobody was watching or validating you? What comes naturally? What does your ideal day really look like? What kind of legacy matters to you?
And I mentioned purpose often comes from pain.
Yeah, surprisingly, working through hardship can clarify what's truly important, what you value most, and that can ignite a sense of purpose that becomes a powerful motivator against falling back into old patterns.
Wow. So moving from being your own mountain to mastering it,
Mm.
it's a whole journey, but the book presents it as almost inevitable once you grasp these dynamics.
It really does. It's like realizing you were holding the lock and the key the whole time. And self-mastery isn't about becoming emotionless or perfect.
What is it then?
It's about emotional intelligence, awareness of your feelings, but consciously choosing your behavior. Mental strength isn't the absence of challenges. It's the ability to navigate them with more fluidity, less resistance.
So the aim isn't always being happy.
Exactly. The book strongly advocates for seeking inner peace over chasing happiness. Happiness comes and goes, often tied to external things. Inner peace is described as more of a steady state, your natural baseline you return to when you stop fighting reality and allow all feelings, good and bad, to just be.
Accepting the full spectrum.
Right. And a big part of that peace is managing the monkey mind, detaching from constant worry. Worry feels useful, protective maybe, but it's not. The source argues it's mostly a distraction. It drains your energy and can even, paradoxically, help create the feared outcome through avoidance or overreaction. And that anxiety from jumping to conclusions. The book says it's often underthinking, not overthinking.
How so?
You leap to the worst outcome without fully thinking through your actual ability to cope if it happened. You stop the thought process too soon.
Worry isn't problem solving, it's just spinning.
Exactly. And remembering feelings aren't always facts. That gut instinct. The book acknowledges its real fast subconscious processing useful in the moment, but treating every flicker of emotion as a prophecy about the future, that's where we go wrong. True instinct feels calm, subtle, not panic.
So making the right decision often creates the good feeling later, rather than the feeling telling you the right decision beforehand.
That's a key insight from the material. Mental strength, therefore, isn't something you either have or don't. It's a practice.
What kind of practices?
Things like having a plan, being okay with asking for help. You're not meant to figure everything out alone. And really focusing your energy on making things right now, using lessons from the past, but not getting stuck there.
Being present and proactive.
Yes, and actively stopping the chase for constant happiness. Allow it when it comes, but don't resist unhappiness. Instead, cultivate appreciation for little joys.
The simple things.
Yeah, the sunrise, coffee, a good book, small present moments. Nurturing those genuinely positive relationships is also huge. Quality over quantity.
And being mindful of where your energy goes.
Absolutely critical. Your thoughts shape your feelings, which shape your beliefs, which drive your behavior, which creates your life. Be intentional. The source even suggests scheduling time for nothing, just being. And time for play, too. Reconnecting with that lighter side.
It sounds like self-mastery, in the end, is about realizing that all that past struggle and discomfort wasn't just pointless suffering.
Right. The book frames it as a sign that you are capable of more, meant to transform. Self-mastery is about claiming that potential and actively creating the transformation.
So the mountain truly is you.
Mm-hmm.
And climbing it, mastering it, is really about mastering yourself.
Exactly. And the person you become in that process, the resilience you build, the awareness you gain, that's the real prize. That's what stays with you.
It's fascinating how this perspective ties everything together. Unconscious needs, daily habits, emotional intelligence, relationships, all as part of this internal landscape we need to navigate. It makes self-mastery feel less like a vague goal and more like a practical, ongoing process.
It really grounds it in self-awareness and those small, consistent actions, moving from being driven by hidden fears to being guided by conscious principles.
So bringing this all together from our deep dive into the mountain is you. What does this mean for you listening? The challenge here is to look inward, isn't it? To see how maybe your external struggles are mirroring these internal patterns.
Yeah, and it offers a path forward. Not waiting for lightning to strike, but starting with understanding, with processing emotions, and making those small, deliberate choices every day. Microshifts.
It really shifts the power, doesn't it? From
Mhm.
feeling like a victim of circumstances to realizing your own agency in creating change from within.
Definitely. So thinking about everything we've explored from this source,
Yeah.
what's one small microshift, maybe just one tiny decision that's different from yesterday that you could choose to make today?
Yeah. What's one step you could take on your own climb towards self-mastery, even if maybe, especially if you don't quite feel like it yet?